Simon has been reacting, I've been reacting, you're all reacting to this incredible story, this one major talking point that emerged this morning. And this story is on the lips of the nation today. A video emerging last night of West Ham's Zouma kicking, chasing, slapping his pet cat in the kitchen of his own home. West Ham have given us a reaction to it this morning. Zouma is extremely remorseful, we're told. But how much reputational damage does it do to the club? And should animal abuse be regarded as a sackable offence? I mean, Simon, it seems to a man, to a woman, everybody is up in arms about this morning.
Well, no one can defend it, can they?
No one can defend it. No one would defend it. Former Liverpool goalkeeper, a good friend of this show, Chris Kirkland, joins us live. Chris, good morning to you.
Good morning. Morning, Simon. You okay?
Morning, Chris. Hello, mate.
Chris, good morning to you. Chris, I'm going to tell people here, you messaged me earlier on to say you've just watched the video and you shed a tear. I mean, this has got you. It's got everybody, hasn't it?
It has, yeah. Being obviously an animal lover myself, but I just can't believe what I watched. I really can't. It's disgusting. It's a tough one for me because obviously I'm a big advocate of mental health. So I mean, this is obviously going to test. Obviously, he's going to be struggling. Listen, he might not be bothered at all. You do things like that, and to be honest, you're a despicable human being. So, but I'm interested to see what obviously Simon's been involved with Crystal Palace. If you were still owner of Crystal Palace and this happened at your club, Simon, what would you do? Would you sack him? You've got to sack him.
It's a difficult one, Chris. I mean, first and foremost, you've got the animal welfare sentencing bill where he can actually be caught by the law under cruelty. You have to understand the length and breadth of it. While the evidence is before our own eyes, the player has to have a right to be able to either explain himself, find a mechanism to illustrate the appropriate amount of contrition, and the consequences have to be weighed up. The full length and breadth of the consequences from A, and people are not going to like it, the financial investment you put in the player, and B, the ramifications of taking him out of a contract and whether they are stickable and whether they're enforceable, because just because there's outrage doesn't mean that legally you can just take him out of a contract. You have to be clear on that. But I would want to make sure that the maximum extent of trying to find a solution, if that solution ended up in a player having to be fired, then I wouldn't shy away from it, but I just wouldn't do it. I wouldn't just pull my gun out straight away, metaphorically, and fire the bullet. I'd want to know the length and breadth of it, and I'd want to be seen to understanding all of it, and I would be communicating and making sure that the player was parked up, put on one side, taken out of the club for a period of time, fined, suspended from his job, while I investigated it like any other disciplinary matter. And then at the end of it, once I had got all the length and breadth of it, then I wouldn't shy away from the right decision.
Here's one for you, Chris. Stephen Sunderland. Jim asked Chris, I'd love to know what other players at West Ham would think this morning. I mean, could his colleagues work with him at this time?
I wouldn't. If I was in that dressing room, no. I would. If I was captain, I'd get him out of that dressing room, and I wouldn't want to play with him again. Definitely not. And listen, as I said, I'm a man. This is just about what's right in humanity. Even if you're not an animal lover, seeing that, it absolutely sickened me. So I wouldn't want to. I don't think there's any way back for him. He's obviously not going to play tonight. West Ham have been backed into a corner time and said, listen, it's not their fault. It's not their fault at all. Simon's completely right, but they've got to handle it now. And the only way for me is he's got to be sacked.
But Chris, as a player, you wouldn't play with him again?
No.
So are you saying, Chris, and I'm in no way, shape or form am I being anything other than devil's advocate, are you saying this is the end of his professional football career in this country?
I would imagine so, yes.
But no chance to redeem himself? No chance to live in a society where people get the benefit of being able to redeem themselves? He's done. End of story. No redemption. Doesn't matter what he does.
Listen, it is an extremely tough one because, as I said, I'm an advocate of mental health. But I think if you're putting stuff on like that, and I know it was his brother, then you don't care. You're doing it to show off. You're doing it because, listen, they were laughing. He's got a kid there. You see the cat run off scared to death. If that was in the street, what would happen? He'd get arrested and he'd be put behind bars. So
we have to hear.
Says it in a minute.
At some point, we have to hear what the player's explanation is. There can be no explanation. Yeah. As I've said at the top end of this, you can't defend the indefensible. But he has to have something to say for himself. And once he's had something to say for himself...
Well, he's told West Ham that he made a mistake.
After that, Simon, so say the investigation does go and West Ham do sack him, but he's obviously free to... Would you sign him if you're in charge of a club? Would you take him on?
It's a difficult question
It's a good question.
Well, it's a question you base upon a redemptive society, Chris. I believe in redemption. I don't believe that once a mistake you've made carries on for the rest of your life. Otherwise, no one ever gets a second chance. We've got to live in a second chance society. But I'd want to understand if I was the owner of this football club, I'd want to have this guy in front of me and I want him to explain to me why, in Christ's names, that I shouldn't be taking the most stringent of action. What can you tell me that takes you away from the precipice? What can you tell me that possibly makes this situation look anything different than what it is? What would you tell me?
There's no excuse.
There's no excuse. I'm with Chris on that. If he kept on saying, Simon, but we haven't I'm sorry.
No, but we haven't heard from the player. We've heard.
That's all he's going to say, though, isn't it? That's all he's going to say. He said, "I'm really sorry."
And that may well be the case, Chris, but he has the right to say it.
That's not good enough. Yeah,
and that's your view, and it may well be my view too.
Chris, listen, I'll read you his apology, okay, mate? He says, I want to apologise for my actions. There are no excuses for my behaviour, which I sincerely regret. I also want to say how deeply sorry I am to anyone who was upset by the video. I would like to assure everyone that our 2 cats are perfectly fine and healthy. They're loved and cherished by our entire family, and this behaviour was an isolated incident and it will not happen again. Is that good enough, Chris?
No, of course he's going to say it. He's not going to come out and say, I had a great time, it was brilliant, I've done it before, so what have I done wrong? He's not going to say that. Of course he's going to come out full of remorse. It doesn't make a difference. It's the same as the case in Scotland. The backtrack, is it Good Willie? The club of backtrack. No club can sign him now because of the backlash it's going to get. The fans will turn on the club. Nobody can touch him now. Nobody can sign him. And listen, he's only got himself to blame.
Well, of course he has. Of course he has. But again, I go to the point, which is ultimately we've got to look at the reality of what happens next with him. And I'm sorry, Chris, there are many morally reprehensible people in football as well in other walks of life, and they don't find the light of day. So I don't want the moral temperature to be so high that we look at everything else in football as if it was possible.
Take this in
isolation, right? In isolation, right? The player needs to be consequenced. The decision is, what does that consequence look like? It's not Chris Kirkland's gift. It's not Simon Jordan's gift. It's the player. The authorities, he needs to be consequenced. There is an animal welfare bill. He needs to be consequenced under the law. He needs to be consequenced by his employer. But it's nobody else's gift. And whatever you do, whatever someone does, it won't be enough. Because some people say he should be fired from West Ham, never play again. Other people say he should be fined for 3 months. Whatever you do, we've got to look at the consequences for it. A, he shouldn't be allowed to have pets again. That's one preventative measure. B, he should show a sufficient amount of contrition. C, he should be consequenced under the letter of the law. And then the next decision is, does he get his entire life taken away from him? That's the fourth part of the equation. That's what's in the offing by his own actions, Chris, and by the ridiculous nature of his behaviour.
This will resonate with you, mate. And it's a very short one-line message from D. Good morning to D. Animal cruelty is not a mistake. That's all D says, Chris.
Of course it's not.
That's all D says. Animal cruelty is not a mistake.
Yeah, it's cowardness, and as I said, I'd like to think he's not done it again, but I certainly wouldn't bet against it. He's obviously has. It probably goes on all the time. So Simon's, listen, you know how much I respect you, Simon, and you, Jim. And it is an extremely tough one, but I just don't see any way back for him. I don't see how any club can touch him after this. Yes, redemption and stuff like that. He's obviously going to say he's sorry, and rightly so. But he's backed clubs into a position now where they cannot touch him because of the backlash that they're going to get.
But there are people, Chris, that have done things. I'm not going to name them because I like them. That have done things, and they found redemption with broadcasters. They found redemption with football clubs.
Okay, Chris, listen, I want to thank you for your time. Chris Kirkland, former Liverpool Wigan Athletic goalkeeper, joining us live. They're deeply affected by this, as is everybody.
Jim White and Simon Jordan. Monday to Friday mornings from 10 on AM, on DAB, via the talkSPORT app and on your smart speaker. talkSPORT.